Hi, my name is Jaylana, and today I would like to begin today's presentation by paying our respects to the traditional owners of the land, the Yagara and the Turrbal people, and extend our respects to the elders past, present and emerging, for they are the future of Indigenous Australia.
Thank you, Jaylana, for the acknowledgement. Hi, my name is Georgie. With me today for our presentation is Lara, Steph and Jaylana. Today we will be discussing progressive versus traditional styles of education. Progressive education is a response to the traditional methods of teaching. This means that the teaching that happens within the classroom gives meaning to our own life experiences through interactions with our world, rather than abstract learning with a formal classroom setting. Progressive education aims to educate the whole child through a holistic approach. This approach develops the child's physical, emotional, social, and cognitive development. The progressive pedagogy encourages teaching children important skills associated with how to feel, act, and think, rather than rote learning, which is the basis of traditional education. Progressive education entails teachers working with a progressive curriculum to make learning fun and engaging, whilst embedding the interests and needs of their students. This is through the use of a practical lesson plan. By doing this, the child will develop more social qualities of cooperation, tolerance, and sharing. It will also develop a child's curiosity and encourage interactions with their world. In a progressive classroom, collaboration and cooperation learning occurs. In a progressive classroom, the desks are in small groups or in a whole class discussion formation. There is also flexible seating, maybe exercise balls randomly scattered around the room, or children are allowed to sit on the floor or work outside in small groups. Students work at their own pace and are not challenged or pressured by the teacher or other students. Children learn because they want to learn, not because they are forced to. In progressive education, children are actively engaged and continuously learning. Children in traditional education memorize facts by rote, but do not have a deeper understanding of the process or the why. Traditional education is also known as the teacher-centered classroom, where the teacher moderates and regulates the flow of information and knowledge that the students are allowed to learn. In a traditional classroom, the layout has been prescribed. The desks are in long rows facing towards the teacher at the front of the room. Traditional education is not flexible and relies heavily on being in a physical classroom. Due to the recent events of the past few years, traditional learning has seen a decrease because of home learning. Although traditional education is being seen as a thing from the past, studies have proven that when a child is put in this type of environment, some students are encouraged into higher levels of competition with an increase to a student's motivation success, while other students cannot keep up with the academic rigor and progressively fall behind their peers. With that quick introduction of progressive and versus traditional education, I will now hand over to Lara, Jaylana and Steph to further develop your insight into this topic.
So today for the activity, we're going to ask you guys to get in the mindset of a Year 5 student. I'm going to set you up into 2 different groups and you'll get your instructions then. You have 5 minutes.
You guys are doing fantastic work.
What are the headers? Like this, similar in the
Great work, guys. Okay guys, great work. So now I'm going to ask you to turn back into pre-service teachers and hold onto your worksheets as they'll be used towards the end in the discussion.
So now we're going to talk about progressive education. First of all, what is progressive education? Progressive schooling was first introduced through John Dewey's theory of education. John Dewey first published his theory of pragmatism in 1894, which is the education philosophy that can be found to most correlate with the progressive schooling system. The pragmatism way of teaching is believing that schools should focus on the social aspect of education, on the parts of education that help students with their future. Pragmatism focuses on students learning through hands-on experience so they can connect with what is being taught and is known to help students create those links between what they are learning and how it can be used. Dewey believed that all students learned in unique ways and education should be catering towards the way that they learn to ensure that they receive the information that would be best for the student. The way that progressive schooling is tested is through the knowledge that students have and how it can be implemented into real world issues and scenarios. It aims to remove standardized testing from schools, as those tests can be known to cause students unnecessarily amounts of stress and pressure that is not good for their education as well as their mental health. Dewey believes that education should be fun and enjoyable for the student rather than something they have to attend. What environment is progressive schooling best for? Progressive schooling is better for small groups in classrooms with possibly 10 to 25 students due to learning being based on the individual person. In a big classroom, it would be harder to connect with students to learn what they are interested in and the best ways they receive information. It is great for classrooms to have lots of colour and the children's work on the walls, as it shows students the other ways that students think and their opinions on topics. So how do we implement progressive schooling into the classrooms? Progressive schooling is best for, due to progressive schooling being based on what would be best for students' education and the future they would like to have. Here are some examples to implement the progressive schooling theory into the classroom. Listen to the way a student learns within the classroom. This will help students be able to connect with the content being taught and to have more interest into what they are learning. Linking content with their future careers that each student might have and how it will be used to get a job is important to help the students understand what their future would look like. Allowing students to use their imagination and to build on their creativity and to express their thoughts and opinions without being judged. They will be the future generation, and building on their originality will help them be able to go into the world and incorporate their ideas into society. Setting up the classroom space using different types of seating, i.e. group tables, singular desks, couches, bean bags, and floor space. Rather than standardized testing, ask students to implement what they have learned in real life scenarios. This will help teachers understand whether the student understands what they have learned and while also linking it to the outside world. Excursions are also another great way for students to link their knowledge to society. Now on to traditional.
So before we explain what is traditional schooling, let's take a leap back into history where it all began. Our journey begins in 1788. Prior to any establishment of schooling or British settlement, Indigenous education was predominantly the only knowledge shared in Australia. Indigenous knowledge has continued to be shared down through many generations, highlighting the importance of beliefs, nature laws, and the dreaming, which is essential to evolving our rich culture. In 1810, the idea of education was represented through the attitude that religion was education. Where churches were introduced, schools shortly established as a development model. The Anglican Church derived from England, sought this as an opportunity to right the wrong. As a struggling society filled with convicts and exiled people, we then moved down a decade to 1820, where a meeting was held on the March 17, 1870, that involved the Excellence Governor that aspired to allow the education of young is the first importance of the best interests of the colony, as affording a sure hope of the advantages which the general circulation of the Holy Scripture tends to bestow us. This meeting openly suggested the establishment of public schools, which further allowed children from lower economical status to attend and receive an education. From this, in 1848, a dynamic system between the churches and states was established, with 4 differential units, each representing one of the 4 main denominations. Soon after this establishment of the schooling system, In the 1880s, the Public Instruction Act was introduced. This act provided society with free, compulsory, and secular schooling for children aged 6 to 14 as a change of systematical structure. Schooling was thoroughly encouraged and established by the states governing rather than churches. In this age, education was aligned with a three-level model which was based on class of wealth and ruling: upper class, middle class, and lower class. What was the teacher's role in this period of time? They were a primary socializing agent. Their job was to educate children in being responsible and productive citizens, educating key factors of numeracy, literacy, and social studies. An active recall and memorization was commonly used as a method of teaching. The student's role. The students must be able to actively recall and memorize a piece of information, then executing this retained knowledge through repetitions of writing, gained the knowledge taught, not necessarily understanding it though. No communication was appreciated, whether that be individually or in groups. Students usually build on character development and developed an understanding of the social standards for both boys and girls. Okay, let's go through the main differences between progressive and traditional schooling with Lara.
Though you would think that people often wonder what's the difference between a traditional school and a progressive school. If you look at the brochures of both, though you would think that they were offering the same kind of education. But in reality, in a traditional public or private school, there's kind of a prize at the end of the line. And the prize at the end of the line is the test scores and the college admissions. In a good progressive school, those things will happen as a byproduct of an education that's a little bit more well-rounded, that has a little bit better balance between, for example, the arts and the academics. I know there are some charter public schools, for example, where they're very proud of getting their test scores up, but there's virtually no arts programs. So the opportunities for self-expression among the students are very limited. If you're not good in math or in reading, which are the two tests that everybody focuses on, then you're kind of in trouble, because the things that you're good at, you don't have an opportunity to express them and to show how good you are in those things.
As we can see in schools nowadays, there's usually a link. There's a mix between progressive and traditional schooling techniques to create the classrooms that are being taught today, using standardized testing as well as incorporating the artistic approach, letting students use their creativity within the classroom.
Okay, so after listening to Jaylana and Lara talk, hopefully you have a greater understanding of progressive and traditional education and the differences between them. So for this activity, I'm going to ask you to turn to your partner, the person next to you, and discuss the differences between them and the pros and cons of each. I'll give you about 2 minutes, and then after that we're going to have a group discussion about the pros and cons and what style of learning you are leaning towards in your classroom. Thank you.
I'm starting.
Okay guys, so what do you think about traditional education / learning?
Well, it can allow more organisation within a classroom.
I think one of the cons of traditional learning might be that it lacks critical thinking, centered learning.
Okay. And yeah, what do you guys think of the progressive learning / education?
Pros, it's student-centered learning. It caters to my needs.
A con is that it can't give students structure, or it can't give structure to students who may need traditional ways.
Okay, thank you so much. You guys have done an amazing job. Okay guys, that was a great discussion. So now I'm going to pass it back over to Georgie to conclude our presentation.
Well, this brings us to the end of our presentation today. In summary, traditional and progressive education have many fors and againsts associated with both. Thank you for participating and interacting with us this morning. I hope you leave today with a better understanding of progressive and traditional education, what it is, and who and what they cater for.